Hey, security pros! Vince Lombardi says winning isn't everything, but wanting to win is. You are listening to Security Pro Insights because you want to win. Your road to success starts now. Welcome back, security pros. Last week, we ended before we were able to finish all our content. Brandon, I would like to thank you for coming back and spending a little more time with us. This episode, we're going to dive a little deeper into some specifics on how to design a quality resume, how to build our LinkedIn profile, and any other items that you may share. So again, I want to thank you for being with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Scott.
Now, Brandon, we were just talking about the mass number of retail store closures. And the brick and mortar world is, I won't say dying, but it is changing and changing drastically. I know our timing's right. There are lots of people that are finding themselves in a position to shift, to pivot, to change career potentially. Where should I start?
I think it's important to really spend some time on where you want your next step to be. If it's within the loss prevention asset protection space, identify where that is. Not necessarily specific organizations, but what do you want to focus on? I think it's prudent in what we're seeing now with, last month we've had a 40% increase in store closures, and well over 31,000 retail jobs have been cut in the first quarter of 2017. I think it's prudent to focus on specific areas and where the business is going. I think focusing on or developing your skills in terms of e-commerce is a sharp move. I think supply chain security, cybersecurity, all very hot markets right now. So spending some time understanding where am I now and where do I want to go before you craft your career marketing documents to help you get there.
Let me ask, if I'm sitting here pondering I'll call it a pivot, not a move out of the industry, but a change in my specialty. So maybe I've been retail loss prevention and I want to move to cybersecurity. Do you feel that it's necessary for me to go get a new college degree, or am I able to just educate myself on that topic through maybe some online educations, some books, and maybe even working with a few peers in our network that can help us along? Do I have to have a full degree, or can I make a shift with just gaining knowledge on my own in my spare time?
My own opinion is I think you can make a shift on your own. I think that, the learning model has obviously changed as well. There's so much information online, and if you tap into your network and connect with industry professionals that are already in that space, pick their brain on the right avenue and how to achieve your goals. I think that if, in terms of technology, look at software development, for example. Because of the need for programmers, the coding boot camps popped up to give organizations some talent in terms of programming and coding. So I think there's other ways to achieve your goals beyond the traditional education model, but you're going to have to invest some time in professional development and making connections, and that might entail starting at the bottom of that specialization. So I think that looks differently from company to company, but certainly there is a way to pivot and make a transition out of the space that you're comfortable in. And I don't think it's necessarily a matter of even having to transition out of the LP space. Brick and mortar retail is changing, but the game will be there. Just the arena it's played in will change a bit. I don't know what that will look like in 3, 5, 7, 10 years. But we're always going to have a need for loss prevention and corporate security in the retail space. So I think it's more prudent to spend time honing your craft by focusing on your own professional development and maybe trying to peer around the corner and taking the information of what we know is happening right now with brick and mortar and using that to guide where you should focus in terms of developing your own skills. E-commerce fraud, supply chain security, and cybersecurity. I think those things are in-demand skills and can't hurt in your own development.
Excellent information. I promised the listeners some meat, so I think we need to dive in. Before we do that, I want to remind each listener right now that Brandon Brown is with Loss Prevention Resumes. You can contact him through his website, losspreventionresumes.com, or find him on LinkedIn. If you are enjoying the content of this show, it's important that you reach out to him and show your appreciation to him as well through great feedback. Maybe he's able to help you in your next endeavor. So Brandon, I've selected my next step. I know what I want to be. I know who I want to be. I know where I want to go. I now need to build this resume. What are some best practices in building a quality resume?
Sure. So I think it's a matter first before you write a word, and I mentioned this in our previous segment, is to create a narrative for your resume. What do you want the takeaway to be when the reader is done viewing and reading your resume? And that's important because it's equally as important to focus on where you've been and what you've achieved as it is where you're going. But I tend to tell people that the smartest way, in my opinion, to approach a resume is to mimic how an advertiser or a marketer would approach an advertisement. You want to capture that attention early. You only have a matter of seconds to capture the reader's attention and generate enough interest to continue to learn more about you. So I prefer the above the fold approach to resume writing, and that is, don't bury your greatest achievements and accomplishments down into the document at the bottom of the first page or even throughout the second page. I don't recommend going longer than 2 pages, but bring that power-packed information up above the fold, meaning the top half of that first page, so they don't have to scroll or turn the page to get a complete picture of who you are and what you've done. I think that's important. I think many resumes use a chronological format that will extend into well into the document. I prefer to flip that. I like that hybrid approach where I can include a very strong summary at the top. I prefer summaries over objective statements. I think objective statements tell the talent seeker what the job seeker wants, but doesn't say how they can solve a problem for the organization. So a power-packed summary just changes the perspective. Instead of you telling the organization what you're looking for, now you're telling them what problems you can solve for them, and you're using proof to back it up. So I think having a hook at the top of the resume, similar to an advertisement, maybe that's a headline, your value proposition, and you lead straight into achievement-based achievements and accomplishments throughout the top of that resume. They don't always need to be throughout your work experience. I think it's important to create some overarching achievements, and you can explain in more detail later in the resume, but I think it's very critical to capture attention and generate interest in the top of that resume. And that's something that I see is lacking in many resumes. And it's important for people to understand that you only have a matter of seconds to do it, because especially, initially in the recruiting funnel, they're not going to read every word in the document unless they're compelled to do so. So I look at it like we're creating the advertisement of you. We're marketing you, and we want to influence the behavior as they're reading. I tend to incorporate not only writing strategies, but design elements as well, because I want the reader's eyes to land on certain sections of the page. There's certain content that I want to really highlight in the document and for them to pay attention to. And that's based on the most pertinent questions that a talent seeker will have. So I think that format, that layout is very important, first and foremost. I think it's also important to remember that it is a marketing document. It's not a book, doesn't have to include everything you've ever done in your career. Be selective on the information that you include, and you're using it to land an interview. It's going to be you that lands the job, but use it as a marketing document to highlight the best that you have to offer, and keep it achievement based. I think a mistake that many people make is their writing is very passive in the resume. So they use statements like responsible for physical security equipment, loss prevention training, and awareness program deployment. Instead of focusing on the roles and responsibilities alone, which can tend to make your resume sound much like a job description, flip it. Lead with the result. What results have you achieved? And then weave that into your roles and responsibilities. So, I like to tell people, replace paragraphs with bullet points. People have an aversion to reading walls of text. It's not reader friendly, and they tend to skip right over it. So break that text up, use bullet points, but front load those bullet points. Start with the result. Start with what you were able to achieve or accomplish, and then support it with how you got there. It goes back to that CAR formula, the challenge, action, result that we discussed earlier. Front loading the bullet points also makes your resume easy to skim, because the reality is they're not going to read every word. So you want to quickly be able to throw out the most pertinent information that you want them to notice. And so front loading your bullet points is very important.
Brandon, I know you're the expert, so I probably shouldn't jump in here, but the thing that jumps out is the average attention span is 7 to 8 seconds. People make decisions in that short of a period of time. And so what I hear you saying is forget all the details, put the achievement, the strong content right there at the top for that first 7 to 8 seconds that person is scanning your resume.
Yes. Yeah, I think that whether that's creating another section where you can have a career highlights section, whether it's incorporating some of those things in your summary, or both, you're trying to capture that attention very quickly. And as you said, you only have a matter of seconds. I think that incorporating other design elements are helpful. For example, most people have recommendations on their LinkedIn profile, but they're not on their resume. Take snippets from those recommendations on your LinkedIn profile and add them to the top of your resume. And that does a couple things. It's not something that the majority of resumes have included in them. And so it's something that already makes yours stand out, but also it adds a bit of social proof to the content. If you get done talking about select achievements that you've had at a particular organization, and then you follow that up with a specific recommendation from a leader in that organization, that's powerful. So I think it's really about using those design elements, formatting, and the achievement-based content to really draw the reader's eyes to what's most important on the page.
Brandon, I'm curious what you think about this idea here. In the last episode, I had talked about how a great majority of our individual thoughts are negative toward ourselves, especially. I know that it's very difficult for each one of us to talk highly about ourselves. We are just not that good at talking about ourselves. Is it a good best practice to let a friend, a coworker, people within your life that know you well, kind of write your resume for you or give input to the resume, because they can probably bring out the higher points, the more positive points than you might be thinking about?
I do. I think that's a powerful tool, is to elicit that feedback from people. What do you consider my strengths? What else do I bring to the table beyond, for example, my certifications, and that's an important point. We are each much more than the experience that we've had at an organization or the letters after our name, the certifications we hold. There is so much more to each of us as individuals. And it's those traits that we also want to capture in the resume. And there's a lot more information that people can include in a professional way, and you're tying that into achievements that you have made. So to give you an example, a lot of people use buzzwords, and throughout their resume, where they're probably not able to identify or key on what makes them unique. So they use terms that many people use, goal-oriented, proven results. And the problem with those is that they're widely used. They don't offer, or very rarely are followed up by any specifics. So they lose their luster. And talent seekers are used to seeing those phrases, and they become meaningless on the resume, and now they're just taking up space. So I tell people, instead of saying things like, proven results, goal-oriented, give them examples of how you are those things, and reach out to your network, reach out to friends and colleagues and say, hey, how would you describe me? And with that, it goes hand in hand, is identifying, again, where you want to go next, what you're trying to communicate in that resume, what's important for that position. It's important to explore both of those things and then communicate it effectively in your resume. So the name of the game really is details, details, details. Use specifics to support the content instead of very vague buzzwords and passive sentences.
Brandon, I want to clarify one thing, though. In the last episode, you talked about the importance of keywords to match the systems that are out there, the automated filters. So can you clarify just a little more? Because I would think those keywords would be goal-oriented or self-starter. Again, just help me understand a little more on how I use those keywords without being so generic.
Sure. So the keywords that you're going to use really are coming from a job description. The keywords that I would focus on are ones that have a lot of the relevant keywords, high frequency. A lot of times they're hard skills. You can use them in a sentence in other ways. I would not use buzzwords that are included in a job description. I would tend to go into more of the skills and experience that the job description is communicating. There's a lot of industry language that is really paramount to include in the resume that is in the job description. So I think it's important to still be selective on what keywords you're using, and stay away from language that is passive in nature and doesn't really offer an opportunity to give up specifics to support them.
All right. Well, another question I have is, would you recommend that I put links to my LinkedIn page or to a blog that I've been using for content, as we discussed in the last episode, our personal branding? Should I put those links within the hard copy resume?
Well, I think that it's important to give access to your other platforms. My concern with that, though, is that the vast majority, and I'm obviously generalizing here, but the vast majority of people will link the talent seeker from the resume to a static LinkedIn profile that simply mirrors the resume, or even worse, one that's completely locked down. The public settings are completely locked down. So, obviously you can control those things and what's shown publicly. But I think it's important to, what are we linking them to, and what's the goal with it? Does it expand further and give examples of how we think, work, and create? Or does it simply mirror the content in our resume? So I would say that if there's not a purpose to link them to those sites or external sites, don't include it. But if it's an opportunity to show your work and show how you think and create, absolutely. I think that everyone should have a powerful LinkedIn profile, and everyone should be linking to it and having the URL on their resume. Absolutely.
Well, I want to dive into the LinkedIn profile, but before I do, I want to just let all the listeners know that Brandon specializes in this space, and one of the services he offers is a resume review. He'll review your resume. He'll work with you to ensure that your resume is built to a quality level to get the attention one might need in whatever search you're trying to achieve. I want to encourage everybody to remember that the best investment you can ever make in life is in yourself. And these are areas of investing in a coach like Brandon to ensure you're getting what you need. All the information in this podcast is excellent, but if you really want it done right, reach out to Brandon and make sure he's able to help you. You just touched on LinkedIn. I personally, again, in my own opinion, think that LinkedIn is one of the most misused social platforms out there today. A lot of people look at it as a place to just place their resume, but I think the tool's more powerful than that. So let's talk about LinkedIn and some best practices in using it effectively.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I think that LinkedIn is a very powerful tool, but very underutilized. I think the most powerful features of LinkedIn are the ones that allow you to showcase, again, how you think and how you work. You can attach content to your profile. You can link out to other sites. You can use the SlideShare function to, again, attach content. The LinkedIn publishing platform, where you're now able to publish long-form posts. I don't think that, I think more people avoid that than embrace it. And I think, going back to what we talked about previously, it's important. It's an important component of your brand to show people how you think and engage. And it's an opportunity to share your ideas and connect with your network. So I highly encourage people to use LinkedIn to establish your brand and embrace that publishing platform. Put content on your profile. LinkedIn's all about search and engagement. We want to engage with our network. We want to build and grow our network, but we also want to be found. And that's especially important if you're a job seeker. There are things that you can do to be found on LinkedIn. And one of those is, as discussed, putting content out. I think the stat is if you post 20 times per month, you'll reach about 60% of your audience. So, and that is important. Let's make sure that you're sharing. Are you sharing, thought leaders content within the industry? Are you posting interesting links to articles that your network would find helpful? So it's important to have your pulse on your network, see what kind of content is important to them and that drives their engagement. And when it comes to your profile, understand that it's important to be social. It is still a social platform. I think a mistake people make is to simply copy the content in their resume and put it on their LinkedIn profile. The summary section of the LinkedIn profile allows you to enter 2,000 characters. And most people don't use all that available space, but that's important from a search perspective. Again, keywords are vital to LinkedIn as well. It's important to identify what words you want to use and be found for when somebody searches for someone like yourself, and make sure those keywords are included throughout your profile. The LinkedIn algorithm obviously applies importance to specific sections in the profile. The headline which is just under your name, you're allowed 120 characters for your headline. Most people use the default current job title for the headline, and that's a missed opportunity. I think that your headline should be, in a sense, your value proposition. I think that you can include much more about yourself and how you can help organizations and solve their problems using that 120 characters, which, granted, it isn't a lot of space, but certainly you can include more than your current job title, and use keywords in the headline as well. That's vital. The second would be your summary. Again, you have 2,000 characters. Show people who you are. What are your passions? What gets you fired up about the work that you do? Share a little bit more about yourself, and don't forget to include some of your proudest achievements and accomplishments in that summary section, and have a call to action at the end. How can people get a hold of you? How do you want them to contact you? And spend some time on that profile. Remember, the LinkedIn just did an overhaul on their user experience, so they've made some changes. And for example, the photos now appear round. So check your photo. Make sure the cropping is correct in your photo. That shows the first 250 words now of your summary, and then they have to click to expand the rest of it. So pay attention to the content that you have in those sections. Another vital section for search ranking is the job title section. Most people will only put the job title. Obviously, that's what it's asking for in that section, but don't forget, don't be afraid to include additional keywords, the keywords that you've identified or that you want to be connected with in those sections. So your headline, your summary, and the job title sections are vital to being found on LinkedIn.
I was thinking about the headline. You said there's not a lot of space. In a recent book I read, and I don't remember the title, unfortunately, but it was a marketing book, and it talked about the importance of being able to define whatever you're trying to put out there. So your service or your solution, you should be able to define it in one word. Again, I don't remember who made the LinkedIn post a week or so ago, and it was a simple post, and it got a lot of comments on it. And it was simply, define yourself in one word. And I responded to it, and I thought it was interesting because it really made me think, what is that one word that I want people to know about me? And that's just a good exercise for people to run through, is really, if I had to define myself in one word, it is blank.
It helps keep your information concise, and it keeps you from, and I think that's why a lot of people avoid coming up with a headline is, as we talked about earlier, it's very difficult to talk about yourself and look at yourself. But I think it's a missed opportunity if you're not optimizing that profile for search and engagement. I think it's a much more engaging headline if you can throw in there some of the things that you've achieved or accomplished, or a little bit more about you than just, I'm a regional loss prevention manager or director of corporate security. You're competing with many other profiles that have the same title. So being a little more personable, remembering that it's a social network is important.
Well, talking about a social network and talking about our industry, the security industry, it is full of a lot of conservative people, a lot of individuals that resist social media in general. To close this episode, what are a few things you might say to the person who is skeptical, maybe even fearful of LinkedIn?
Well, I would say that you still control what content is visible. In terms of not only the content that you are including or writing, but what sections of the profile are publicly visible. You can make those changes, and you have control in the settings. I think it's probably more about fear of putting yourself out there. And to that, I would say we're more concerned with how we're viewed than how other people are viewing us. It's important, and I think that's a part of personal branding, that it's very difficult to brand yourself if you're not willing to put yourself out there. I think there are ways to use LinkedIn to engage other people that are very underutilized. I talked about the publishing platform before, even the feed updates in LinkedIn. I see commonly, and this may be to your point, people that are just uncomfortable putting more information out there. But for example, they'll put out, hi, I'm seeking a loss prevention position in Tennessee. Please send me any leads. Remember, you're competing for attention. And so it's important to make the most of that feed update. You're allowed 600 characters in that feed update. I would fill that up, and I would approach it very similar to how I would approach a resume. I'd like to get their attention first. I'd like to explain a little bit more about me. Your network can't help you if they don't know exactly what you're looking for. Include a bit more about your experience level, what kind of position you're seeking, and how people can get a hold of you. Don't make them take that extra step to click on your profile or go back to another page to get contact information. Put it in the update and make it easy for your network to help you. And so I think that if you're going to be on it and you're going to use it, maximize it. And don't be scared to put yourself out there. Obviously, within reason. I mean, we all know of the hazards of being online and sharing too much personal information. But in terms of LinkedIn, I think that it's an environment where we're showcasing what we can do professionally, and we can still be selective about the information that we share, but we can also be strategic in how we do it.
Yeah, you're just saying be creative and separate yourself from the others. An example of that would be in LinkedIn publishing. And maybe you do a 10 reasons why I'm the employee of the year. And you open it up and it's just 10 bullet points of why you're a great employee. Those little things will stand out from the rest and separate you in the search.
Absolutely. And the publishing platform on LinkedIn for the long form posts is indexed by search engines. So it's, in my opinion, very important. I think people can get very creative with the content that they include that still highlights how they communicate and create and how they approach their job without revealing too much. If that's your concern, is revealing too much information, you can still be strategic in how you do that, but I still think it's very, very important to your personal brand and being able to separate yourself from the crowd.
I don't disagree at all. And I think anyone searching for a new opportunity should be using LinkedIn, should have a spectacular resume, and should be branding themselves 100% of the time and constantly building that network, all which we spoke about over these 2 episodes. Unfortunately, our time has run out again. So listeners, one more time, I just encourage you to reach out to Brandon directly. You can find him on LinkedIn, Brandon Brown. You can also contact him through his website at losspreventionresumes.com. For now, that's the end of this episode, and we'll see you next week. Brandon, thank you for your time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, Security Pro Insight listeners. Thanks for listening to this episode with our special guest, Brandon Brown. I want to make you aware of a special offer that is exclusive only to our listeners. It is a 15% off resume writing services with Brandon Brown. Just go to securityproinsights.com/LP-resume. This will give you the opportunity to sign up for our email list so you can always be aware of updates. And when you sign up, you will receive a special code for the 15% off to be used with Brandon Brown. I hope this is an offer you can take advantage of. Until next week, happy day.